And my text this morning is found in the book of Genesis. We're going way back to the beginning. Genesis chapter 50 and verse 15 through 21. Genesis 50, 15 through 21. This is about one of my favorite heroes of the Old Testament, Joseph. He's a type of Christ in the Old Testament, and there's amazing lessons that we can learn from his life. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "Perhaps Joseph will hate us and may actually repay us for all the evil which we did to him." So they sent messengers to Joseph, saying, "Before your father died, he commanded us, saying, 'Thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father.'" And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also went and fell down before his face. And they said, "Behold, we are your servants." Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. Now therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones." And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. It was at the end of their father Jacob's life that Jacob was carried in a coffin after he was mummified by the Egyptians up into the land of Canaan. And when the whole entourage of Jacob's family, which only consisted of 70-some people, that was the little Hebrew nation clan at this time, that came up with a lot of dignitaries of Egypt accompanying them, because they had great respect at that time for Jacob and the family. And they mourned so loudly after they crossed the Jordan River and buried Jacob near the oaks of Mamre with his forefathers, Abraham and Isaac. They mourned so loudly that the Canaanite peoples in the surrounding regions heard them mourning down in the valley. And after this, there came a haunting thought to the brothers of Joseph, because many of you remember what they did to Joseph many years ago before this. And they never really resolved that terrible memory. And hence my message is titled, "Healing Hurtful Haunts." Why do I call it haunts? You might be thinking, what in the world is a preacher doing naming a title like that? It's not even Halloween. We're in the middle of March almost. Healing hurtful haunts. You know, as I've talked to Christians over the years, I've come to find out that many Christians are dealing with memories. Good, praise God, but also bad, also even ugly. Many of which, just like Joseph's brothers, are going along in life unresolved. Many unresolved. And when it comes to making decisions about following Christ and this, that, or the other thing, believe it or not, those bad memories are in the mix. And I've actually seen Christians who are afraid to follow Christ because of some tainted memory back here that's never been dealt with. And I say to myself, Jesus is not supposed to move off of his throne for a bad memory to be dictating in your life. And so it is important for us as we go along in life. I don't have the feeling this morning that this is a once and done message, that we're going to go through this message of dealing with painful past memories. That's what haunts can mean. Believe it or not, I thought of this word haunts when I was dealing with some Christians and they were bringing up their past memories, that this person is just like haunted by this. And then I asked myself the question, why am I thinking of that word? And so in meditating on this message and so forth, I pulled Webster's off the bookshelf. Take notice, I didn't go to Google. Low-tech guy here. I went to Webster's. Now, I'm progressing. When I hear the word Google, I don't still say, what's that? And think that it's related to giggle because it rhymes, just like you giggled. I've advanced a little bit, but I came to find that Webster's meaning, as well as Thorndike Barnhart, means to visit often. That's the first meaning of haunt, to visit often. And how often do we visit memories? Often, right? We visit memories often. And they have an effect on us. Some memories, and I've just seen this very lately, bring you to tears. Some memories are so fun and so good, they get us laughing, don't they? And some memories make us want to cry a bucket of tears, like the memories of Joseph's brothers. We're going to look at some things about the relationships in the family of Jacob and his multiple wives. Now, before you rag on Jacob for the multiple wives, remember that that's the culture of the time. God didn't come to change culture, he came to change hearts. And then hearts change within the culture and the cultural structure and the societal structures. And remember that Jacob sort of got shystered into marrying Leah first, the homely girl, by Laban, his father-in-law. And he loved Rachel, though, so much. And Rachel indeed was beautiful. And that's the girl he wanted. That was the girl of his dreams. And Laban withheld her for another 7 years till Jacob earned a dowry for her. And interestingly, Rachel remained barren, as the scripture says. And Leah could produce children, and she did. And when Leah could produce, she gave Jacob her two concubines, Zilpah and Bildah. And they produced children for him. 4 of the boys, 4 of Joseph's older brothers came from those two concubines. And so we have a kind of friction-y setup, don't we? I mean, more than one wife, sorry ladies, take this the right way, is a setup for a little bit of household friction, right? You see the sandpaper on my hands? And then the children come from them, and these are my children. You don't do this with my children. And so on and so forth. Woo! Boy, who wants that kind of world? And so after the 10 boys are born, Rachel is able to conceive, and she gives birth to a beautiful child, and his name is Joseph. And just as Jacob doted over Rachel, he dotes over her son. He is the special golden boy of the family. And Joseph has this tunic made. It's sort of unfortunate we've been schooled in this many-colored tunic instead of just a royal ornate tunic, which is probably the better translation. And all Bible scholars agree that the Hebrew at that point is difficult to interpret. And so we got schooled in Sunday school. I still remember the pictures of Joseph with stripes going all the way down of various colors on this tunic. And the tunic only went down to here. But archaeological and historical studies, especially of Egyptian hieroglyphs, has given probably a better picture than the scriptures give us here of what that tunic was like, and more importantly, what it meant. It was a tunic that started at the neck and it went all the way down to the ankles. And the colored part was around the long sleeve cuffs, just maybe about where my cuff is on my shirt. That would have been stripes of color around there on both sides, and then stripes of color around the hem of it, if you want to call it a skirt, okay? And that is what kings and princes wore. And I asked the question of Jacob, was there something prophetic in that? And I think there was. There was something Jacob saw. Remember, Jacob, he was a supplanter. He was clever at getting what he wanted in life until God showed him, don't be robbing from people. I'll send my angels up and down the ladder to bless you with whatever you want. And after he has that experience, he says these golden words of such a grabber, I will give to the Lord. Wow, isn't that a miracle? Jacob actually got better with age. Little wonder called him Israel, one who has prevailed with God and man and succeeded. And so he dresses this boy in this tunic. Now, one time Joseph was sent out, back in Genesis 37, the whole saga starts, and it's sprinkled. The Joseph story is sprinkled from Genesis 37 all the way to Genesis 50, and there's other stuff that goes on with the boys, some of it pretty bad, pretty steamy. We don't need to look at that, but the boys all noticed that Jacob, their father, loved Joseph more than them. And almost like the language goes, more than all of them put together. That's how bad it is. And they began to envy him. That's where trouble starts, doesn't it? They began to envy him and hate him. I remember about Jesus, it is said, there's like a special note in the gospel account when Jesus is on trial. They had delivered him up because of envy. Remember that line? There's a lot of typology to Jesus here that I don't have time to get into. We want to deal with our memories more so. But maybe we'll touch on that a little bit if I get rabbit trail once in a while. Anyway, so they hated him. And then to pile on top of this starry-eyed, handsome 17-year-old boy goes traipsing out to the fields to join his brothers as they're tending the flocks and the herds. And it's after he has had these 2 dreams. And boy, did them dreams put stars in him and his dad's eyes. Wow. But you better watch out, young man, who you tell that to. And what do you think? Who do you think you're being by bragging around about this? He goes out and he walks into those brothers and he spills the beans about his dreams. And boy, does that ever escalate trouble. See, he already knows they don't like him. And some people have said of Joseph, he shouldn't have been so cocky to go out there and brag around about his dreams. Well, I considered that as a possible view on what he did, but I also considered it from a different angle. And that is, he knew he was disliked. He knew he wasn't accepted by his brothers. So could he have possibly been thinking that maybe, just maybe, if they see that I'm hearing from God in these dreams, maybe they will honor me instead of despise me. So that's another possible way of looking at it. I'm not saying that's altogether right, or the other view is right either. But it's a possibility that may have been going on. We all want to work things so people would accept us, don't we? And when we are unacceptable, we might work a scheme out that might make them accept me. But it didn't work for Joseph if that was his intention, because now they hate him more. They can't stand his guts. And that tunic that he's wearing, it's not beautiful to them. Well, that's the ugliest thing they ever saw because of who's wearing it. And so they culminate in this plan to kill him. Reuben bails him out and saves him and says, no, let's put him down in this dry cistern. Dry cisterns could be deeper than the height of the floor to the ceiling here. And it was shaped sort of like a rounded triangle like this with a small hole at the top. Jeremiah, remember, was put in a cistern like that. And so they threw him down in there in that dry cistern. And from there, they hatched a scheme when they saw some Midianite traders going down the roadway headed for Egypt with all of their wares to sell in Egypt. They hatched a scheme to sell him as a slave to them. And interestingly, this is just kind of a trivia point, but Judah, remember who's from the tribe of Judah? It was Judah who was like the connecting link to see to it that Joseph's life was spared and that he was sold to the Midianite traders. Because these are the first steps toward Joseph being the savior of his people. Now that's in a natural sense, not more so than a spiritual sense, right? But the natural pictures the coming spiritual in Jesus, doesn't it? So these are like the first steps, him being sold to the Midianite traders, and we know where he's going to end up, right? He's going to end up on the auction block in Egypt to be sold as a servant. And somehow this official, whose title is Potiphar, from the most powerful king on earth at the time, empire. And Potiphar is their word for captain of the guard. In other words, Potiphar was the head of the secret service for the king of Egypt. He would be like our head of the secret service for the president. And he buys Joseph. And Joseph comes into his domain in Egypt there, in the capital, in the palace compound, which is huge and extensive, with many different buildings for different purposes. And he observes over the course of time that this young Hebrew does well at everything that he does. He does well and prospers at everything that he does. In spite of the terrible background that this boy has come from, he has resiliently sustained his capabilities in life. Can you imagine the tailspin that you being sold as a slave would put you in? That alone, on top of that tunic that you treasured, that your dad gave you, has been dipped in goat's blood and taken back to your dad and your dad comes to believe a lie that some animal tore my precious son to shreds. And in the place of this precious tunic that he was so charmed over, he has continuous mourning that he never gets over. The scriptures indicate that he's not getting over it over long periods of time. Some of you know what that's like in losing a loved one. And so he never gets over it. And you think of all that happening to this young man. But the key is in chapter 39, verse number 2, is this: the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And verse number 3 says, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. And so Joseph found favor with God. He found favor with man. Sound like somebody else? Yeah, like Jesus. It is said the same thing of him in his youth as well. But he's already got all these bad memories, but he's functioning so resiliently. Now, I want to say this. This is about memories, but it's also about us living in a world where Jesus said, this is my paraphrase now from Luke chapter 17. He says, it's a reality, folks. Offenses are going to come. Offenses from people, bad and ugly, that you're going to remember. That's the way life is in this world. But we can look at Joseph and say, horrible crimes were committed against him. Imagine him, he loved his father Jacob. His father Jacob's getting old, even though he would have one more son, a tail ender, Benjamin, with Rachel again. But he's getting old. And where is this going to go? Will I ever see him alive again? But he resiliently functions so well that he's prospering, and it's a special thing that the Egyptians notice it. And in the language of the Egyptians, who are pagans, who have all kinds of other gods, they say, God is with him. They say God is with him. Now, that is an awesome point, because Joseph lives before Moses and the law. How much of a Bible does he have? None. All he has is what his father passed on to him. And like I said, his father was getting better with age. I can just see Jacob sitting down with Joseph and telling him about the dream he saw of the angels going up and down. And he said, I got so excited, I wanted to give back to God. Wow. Those kinds of personal miracles had happened, and I believe were instilled in this young man, and his resiliency was like through the roof. Can God do the same for us when we have bad encounters and we keep on winging it for the Lord in spite of? Yes, he can, no matter what comes at you. But we're dealing with things from the past too sometimes, and we weren't so well equipped in God. So it's really something how he runs into troubles. You know, just because we, through Jesus Christ, have good favor with God, and that's almost an understatement. I don't know how to say it to convey how much favor you and I have with God because of Jesus Christ. When he looks at me, he's looking at Jesus. And he's saying, for Jesus, my son's sake, I will do for Mark. For Jesus, my son's sake, I will do for Danielle, John, Lisa, so on, all the way through. I will do for you, for Jesus, my son's sake. We got pull, folks. We got pull that supplies resiliency when we face the incomings of life. Hallelujah. So, enter Potiphar's wife. Oh boy. Now I got your attention, ladies. This is where things get steamy. Joseph was a handsome man and he was well built. The scriptures don't pull any punches about it. And Potiphar, he's off doing his job. And she's at home in the house. Golden opportunity, huh? Oh my goodness. Potiphar's wife, the seductress. Surely, as Joseph was prospering, there must have been times when he remembered his father and wept and had grief of soul and heart unresolved. And here is very likely, we don't know for sure, but a beautiful Egyptian woman truly seductive and appealing to him. You know, way back yonder in my time in counseling classes, counselors, psychologists talked about the experience in human life of pain and pleasure. They call it, somebody once wrote a book or something called The Dance of Pain and Pleasure. That life is a dance of pain and pleasure. We have emotional pain, and we seek to mitigate against it with pleasure. I believe it to be true. And I believe it's why God says, taste and see that the Lord is good. He gave us taste buds for pleasure, right? He also says in another place, in thy presence is fullness of joy, and at thy right hand there are pleasures forevermore. He's beckoning us. He's baiting us with his pleasures so we don't take the wrong pleasures. And here was Joseph being tested. And men, I'm sure he had testosterone issues too. And it would have been so easy. Oh, I've had so much pain in my life. You look so good. The dance of pain and pleasure, and the seduction to wrong pleasure. Ooh, what a tough one. He weathers it. He holds out and holds up against the temptation. This is before Christ. That's admirable, because this is how good relationship was described back then. The Lord was with you. Just simply put like that. The Lord was with him. And it doesn't stop things from turning down, though. You know, again, you might have good pleasure with the Lord and good favor with the Lord. It doesn't mean everybody's going to have good favor towards you, human-wise, in human relationships. So, of all things, he runs to get away from her. What does she grab? Another tunic bites the dust. Another tunic is in the midst of his troubles. I remember somebody else like that. They put a king's robe on him, and they mocked him and spit on his face and beat him. And in the trial, which was probably like a kangaroo court thing, she set it up very likely, because she's a woman scorned. Look out, right? You know about that line, a woman scorned. Now he has her wrath. And he ends up in the palace jug. There was actually a prison for political prisoners, those who had offended Pharaoh. That's what Potiphar was in charge of. And lest we think that it was like some of our prisons for high-profile politicians and so forth, kind of too cushy. It wasn't. Psalm 105 says that Joseph's feet in that prison at the first, now, we're not saying all the way through, were in fetters. Those are like handcuffs, only ankle cuffs. And oftentimes a chain went from the chain between the two fetters to a wall where they could only have so far to go. Now that's at first, because as time went on, well, what do you know? He prospered so well in prison, he functioned so well, he became promoted to be the prison administrator. Then these two guys get thrown in there. The chief butler and the chief baker. They have offended Pharaoh. You know, they might have come before him with their hair not groomed or something like that. There was little things even that could offend the Pharaoh. But he had a spat with them, and they got thrown into the jug and under the administration of Joseph. And they have dreams, remember? And the butler with the birds eating the loaves of bread, or no, the baker with the loaves of bread being eaten, and his head is going to roll in 3 days. That's the meaning of Joseph has the meanings for the dreams. And then the butler has a dream, and his life is going to be spared through the word of Joseph's interpretation of his dream. And it is. And Joseph makes one plea with the butler. And he said that he would remember him before Pharaoh for being put in prison and so forth. And perhaps he told the story of the truth about what happened with Potiphar's wife so that Pharaoh would let him free. But verse 23 of chapter 40 says, "Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him." Bad memory. People who said they would do thus and so for you. And they didn't even show. And that's the chief butler. Insult to injury. You could say, once again, Joseph is enduring. And again, Joseph does not spiral downhill like a wounded plane going to a crash. If you look at some of the records of some of the other biblical greats, David, for example, in some of the Psalms, when he gets hit by stuff, he spirals downhill for a while. He's going toward the grave and Sheol and all this kind of very depressive language. He spirals down. Joseph doesn't. He doesn't spiral downhill from all these things. And he doesn't take the bait to react with a pleasurable experience in the wrong way. Because I'm backtracking here a little bit because I want to make sure you get this point. When we respond wrongly to people's mistreatment, in a sense, and we're not following Christ in how to respond, and we respond negatively, and I'll just use the simplest example, the most frequent example that Jesus emphasized, the example of forgiveness. If we don't forgive and become bitter, that their unforgiveness makes us allies with the adversary that's taking us down. Do you see that? If when we are assaulted, when we are offended, instead of forgiving in our emotional pain, we turn back to some former addiction, we are joining ourselves with the enemy that is seeking to take us down. I want to make sure you get that. Any response to negative incoming that sought to dig at us, to take us down, that is not of Christ, joins us with the adversary as an ally. And we are working in battle against ourselves. It's why some people say not forgiving another person and wishing bad for that person is like drinking poison and expecting that poison is going to kill that person. You're the one it's going to get. No brainer, right? That's an important point when fielding incoming, I'll just use the word stuff. Okay. Behave. So, and you know this chief butler, he forgot him. Listen to this. Chapter 41, verse 1 will tell you, for 2 full years, oh, I want to get a hold of that guy. See? Oh. Oh boy. Well, he's doing well again. Man, you can't kill this guy. Yeah. Do you know what? In Jesus, I'm not being the over optimist here. In Jesus, we're indestructible. When it all boils down at the end of the book, when you start at the front and end at the back, you say, these people who are believers in this God are indestructible. They are. They are. You are. You are Marge. You are Ray. You are Lisa. On and on. You are indestructible in Jesus Christ. Hell cannot stand against you. It will fall before you. And all the hellish memories piled up that pop out of the file, given the right stimulus in your environment, can't stand against you. They gotta fall. In the place, Jesus makes new good memories. That, like Jacob, becomes something to pass on to others and make them resilient like Joseph. That's his purpose for you. I often think I do recycling. God had a great big recycling program long before man thought of it. And he took all of this garbage Joseph went through, and he said, I can work with that stuff. Oh, I love it. I love what I'm doing with this stuff. Think of your worst memory. God is sitting on the edge of his throne, looking at you and saying, John, give me your worst memory. I'm going to take that thing and I'm going to so heal you of it. I'm going to heal the relationships involved with that thing as you take action. You got to walk it out too. But as you take action, and I'm going to make it something glorious. I'm going to turn it into an ornament of gold. And you're going to look at it and delight yourself in the Lord. And everybody who hears your testimony will delight themselves in the Lord. You know, some of us who have not grown up with a lot of these hard knocks, we hear the testimony of those who have, like Joseph's. And we say, oh my goodness, I don't have much of a testimony compared to that guy, what he went through. And there's some truth to that. But I'm a miracle in many ways too. But anyway, yeah, it's true. Where sin abounded a lot, grace did much more abound. To recycle bad stuff into good. That's what God is all about. Whatever bad memories we have, he wants to heal it. Oh, so Pharaoh. He's working his way there to Pharaoh. Because Pharaoh has a dream that he can't figure out. And none of his soothsayers, magicians, sorcerers could figure it out. And finally the butler gets some sense in his noggin. Oh, I remember a guy. Oh, that guy you put in charge of the prison. He told me the meaning of my dream. His God worked for him. finally, after 2 years, and Pharaoh stimulating him by a puzzling dream. And he probably wants to get points with Pharaoh. Does he really want to do something good for somebody? I don't know. Anyway, so he calls for Joseph. Joseph interprets the dream, the 7 cows, fat, 7 cows lean, meaning there's going to come 7 fat years of bumper crops in Egypt. And after that, famine begins. And then with the heads of grain, basically the same message, so we don't need to get into that. But Pharaoh receives answers to his enigmatic dreams from this one who knows the true and living God. And he is promoted to being almost as Pharaoh. He's probably somewhere between a vice president and a president. That's how close he is. It's like Pharaoh says, you go out there, your decision is mine. Follow my decisions too, but you go out there, you see a case that needs to be dealt with, your decision's mine. He came to trust him that well. And in the end, Joseph becomes a savior of the little starving Hebrew clan up in Canaan. And you know the story of how they came back and forth for grain and all the shenanigans. Joseph, he was totally culturally Egyptized and veiled behind the culture and language of Egypt to where they didn't know him. And it doesn't say that they were lying. They just didn't know him. And so much time had elapsed, they didn't know him. And so he rescues them with the grain that he has by his management in the whole land of Egypt. I've known archaeologists and historians who have found bins from that time period in Egypt that were probably where he stored the grains. And the clan came down and they were saved. And now, to get to the brothers again, the bad boys. Here's why I say that. When their dad died, after all this time, can you imagine living with this secret? Secrets can be bad. Secrets in family trees with bad choices that have been made and stuff, and they're bad. You get into some real dark stuff there. So they're living with a secret about a deception. Imagine being around your dad and he's believing this lie for decades about a lost son. I don't know. I want to go like this. That stinks. That really stinks. So they get troubled when Jacob dies. It's like a shield. That indicates these boys, they have not resolved this issue in all of this time. I didn't do the math, but this is decades, plural. Decades of time they didn't resolve this issue, this memory. How do you live with yourself? It's an appropriate question. These are the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel. God doesn't pull any punches about how sinful they were, does he? It's all a setup because they need Jesus, like we do. Because we have to say, but for the grace of God, there I go. Yeah. So they saw their father was dead. They said, oh no. Perhaps Joseph will hate us and may actually repay us for all the evil which we did to him. There's good and bad in that. And it goes on, so they sent messengers to Joseph. Don't it irk you when somebody offends you and they pull a third party in, and the third party says, oh, and by the way, so-and-so says sorry for what I did. Oh, is that ever a great stretch to forgive under those circumstances? They've just compounded their problem with me. And the brothers say, let's send a messenger to him. Let that guy take the heat. Maybe he'll kill the messenger and he'll feel happy. Them boys just would not learn. Ay, 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 ay. And they asked for forgiveness and everything. And the messenger, I believe what happened, it's a little testy on how things unfolded there. But what the best I can ascertain is the messenger came back to the boys and said, oh, he's just broken up. He's just broken up. They, by human reasoning, they had a right to say, maybe he'll repay. People repay, right? Not this guy. Remember, God is with him. That's the description of good relationship in this Old Testament period. God is with him. He's weeping and sad for you. Who does that remind you of? Jesus once sat on the hillside overlooking Jerusalem and wept. Oh, Jerusalem. They were about to take him and beat the living tar out of him and hang him on a cross. Jerusalem. How often would I have gathered you under my wings, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you would not. Joseph gave them the opportunity to begin making new and good memories. This message is challenging us to look back at the bad memories that come to the fore, that haunt us, because we visit them now and then. To visit frequently is a haunt. And sometimes they dictate to us. And sometimes they bring tears to our eyes over unresolved problem issues. Ongoingly, let's pay attention. You are valuable to God. And what that means is, when gold is refined or silver refined, all the dross, that's an old biblical word, has to be boiled out of it. Because the maker of that item out of silver or gold doesn't want to taint its appearance. He wants to be able to love that thing which he creates. That's the way God looks at you. And he says there's that ugly old memory, that's dross. That's ugly mud amidst gold. That's got to go, he says. You follow the Holy Spirit, go it will. It may involve some fire. It may involve not being like Joseph's brothers and going eyeball to eyeball with somebody. Lord, I pray for your blessing upon everyone who is watching this message via live stream. And I pray that this message becomes a reality in their life for your healing. Okay, we'll go off.